Hey guys, this is Zane here, back at it with another day of watching Monster House every single day of the month with my friends because I want them to, you know what? I think I've got this wrong literally every single day of the month, like this entire time. That's okay. Whatever. It's fine. That's like the least important part of things. So, I'm going to try and get this one as concise and down-packed as I possibly can since it's late. But I also think I have a lot of content to actually go through this time, since I've got like 2 full pages of notes worth of stuff to actually get through, and we'll see whether or not I can get through it within the 30 minutes. But however fast I get through this is roughly how fast I'm gonna get through it, I suppose. So, specifically this time around, I want to cover the information based pretty much entirely on the behind the scenes special credit stuff that they have on the DVD, as well as a couple of the interview stuff and from footage that was from the premiere of the movie. So we'll get into that, and I'll be getting someone on tomorrow or the day after, I promise. But this is also a lot of the stuff that I've covered in the past couple days has been stuff that I can inherently go over with multiple people or discussing with someone else, because it's just notes that I've taken and like essay type stuff. So I don't feel too bad for not having a whole someone else on at the time. But I do have other stuff planned, so we're all good for that. Oh, and also before the behind the scenes stuff, there's a couple stuff from the trailer that I actually noticed. So we'll get right into this. From the trailer on YouTube, I think it's the top billed one for the trailer if you want to buy it off of YouTube. They have some interesting stuff that isn't present in the other trailer or some stuff within the movie. So I believe at the beginning of the movie when Eliza's on the tricycle, she goes by a concrete wall on her tricycle. Don't know why that was so hard to say. And I don't think she does that in the movie at all. So that could have just been something left over from one of a scene that was cut, or they kept it in, or it totally is in the movie, and that's something I haven't actually noticed. They definitely used a bunch of different music that wasn't present in the movie. I mean, for most of the time, movies in the trailers, they don't tend to use the movie music that was actually in the trailer. So that's not really too far off beat, but it's definitely a different composer, I believe. And another thing that is really weird is for some reason they used the Beetlejuice theme in the YouTube trailer, at least. They didn't do it on the one that showed up on TV, but I have no idea why they put in the Beetlejuice one. The soundtrack does sound pretty similar to that of like Danny Elfman's, so it's not unfitting, but it's just, that's Beetlejuice and this is Monster House, so I don't exactly know why they did that. What else have we got? They use a different screen for Bones when he gets eaten by the house, and they have like a little bit of a 3D kind of panorama shot going up the stairs, and it's the closest that we actually get to seeing the upstairs part of the house, and they use that as a shot to show the Robert Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg as like some of the producers. So hey, that's an interesting one. During the trailer, the entire cop car gets eaten in one go while the cops are in it. Like the carpet, the tongue, or whatever you want to call it, grabs the back of the car and whips it back into the house, instead of, eating it slowly like it did in the other ones. And this has some weird, consistency issues with also them showing footage later on where the kids are stuck in the cop car and the cops are gonna get eaten. So the whole trailer was not done particularly well in that regard. But I mean, it's a movie trailer. Are people really supposed to be nitpicking it like I am? It's really not a big deal. And the trailer gets across the whole point of the movie, so does it really matter? No, not in the slightest. So it's all good. When the paperboy goes by the house and throws the paper at it, he says, "Stupid house," and that's not present in the end movie. So I don't know who they actually got to voice the paperboy for that, or if it was someone just on the spot. And that was kind of about it from the trailers that I watched. Like, everything else was just footage exactly from the movie with a voiceover for the stereotypical guy that's like, "In a world where blank and blank," stuff like that. So, which is kind of nice that there wasn't a whole lot to cover, because having to go from movie footage back to trailer footage and like check the difference between the two. Maybe there's some really small ones, but I kind of doubt it. So we'll move on to the more exciting stuff here, which is the total, all like 30 or so minutes of the behind the scenes footage from the movie. I didn't really think I'd get to this as fast as I did, but there's a lot here. So I might have to like rapid fire fast facts you and just get right to it, because a lot of these things are just kind of small points and aren't worth discussing too much. But I do want to do a little bit more research into the more of the development behind the movie and whatnot. I wanted to go and try and get into contact with the actual director, Gil Keenan, for the movie, but it doesn't look like he's super present on anything. Maybe I'll find his email or shoot him an email or something. I think that'd be kind of funny. Seems like a cool dude. But first thing that they mentioned within the behind the scenes, it's broken up into a bunch of different parts, but I'm doing all this in chronological order as it went by. So what they did before anything else was they picked a style with some certain concept art and stuff like that. So they had all of that planned out way before they got like models, actors, or anything like that, and they decided to go for like hyper realistic colors instead of like cartoony looks, and it worked out really good in its favor. They didn't want to recreate a lot of the actors one-to-one with their features and whatnot, so they exaggerated very like certain things, maybe like some longer arms making them a bit lankier, taller, skinnier, specific like chubbier cheeks, stuff like that. And they went specifically with asymmetrical features within the faces to make sure they were following a more cartoony look rather than a more realistic look. I mean, faces are pretty asymmetrical as it is, but when you're doing it following these kinds of models, it works a lot better when it's not being mirrored, because you don't get weird eyes and whatnot. As I mentioned before, the concept art shots are like extremely in-depth, like they're nuts. The artist that did all of them, last name I believe is Appel Hansen, like absolutely killed it. You can probably see a good majority of his artwork and stuff online, but it's a bit lower resolution, but it's still there, and it looks so good. I can't like overstate that enough. It's like insane. But I don't want to spend too much time on that, because you could do an entire episode just based on the art in and of itself. So the first thing that they did for when it came to the character models was they made clay models of exactly how they wanted to do it based off of the concept art, and then they scanned those into 3D models using computer software, and the clay was just like the typical brownish clay, and they added all the colors in the online 3D stuff. And the director, Gil Keenan, did a wish list of all of the actors he wanted to get in the movie, and everyone's like, oh, it's a wish list, you're never gonna get any of the stuff that you want, but like, one can dream. And somehow he got every single person that he asked for on his list. So it's a huge feat. You get these specific people that you're like, I want them to do this specific thing, and hopefully you can get them. And a lot of these are really top billed people, like a good majority of them are. So it's a huge surprise that they'd even either weren't busy around that time or said yes, because this was a weird time for like where motion capping and stuff was either at its peak or lowest, and the stuff was like starting to not look as good. But all of them said yeah. And all of the kid actors were apparently freaking out on set all the time, because John Heater, of course, was in it, and all of them were big fans of Napoleon Dynamite, which is really funny to see, like them interacting in that way, especially because he's a decent amount older than all the kids. and everyone was super surprised that they'd even get Kathleen Turner in the movie. I mean, I'd be surprised that they got pretty much almost anyone that they actually got. And it seems like everyone within the development actually had a fun time filming the movie, which is wild because most of the time I always think of horror stories when it comes to working on movies with specific people. But I mean, this is like very specific, edited, but behind the scenes and stuff, so they could have omitted a lot. But by the looks of the footage, it seems like everyone was having a good time. And during the shooting for it, the kids actually became best friends and proceeded to keep hanging out after the movie was done. The likelihood of them being friends these days is pretty low. Maybe that's something I'll have to figure out. But I think that's actually super neat. And I mean, I guess usually when you work with kids, they either would hate each other or they probably would be friends. So it's nice to hear that it's a bit of the latter. And when John Heder was on set, he was shocked to find out that the kids weren't like super shy and quiet, because I guess a lot of people that he's worked with around that time were all super quiet and kids, but these ones were super outgoing, and they all got along super well, and they're always running around in super high energy. So that's kind of nice. And a lot of the actors expected that they'd just be doing voice acting since it was an animated movie, but they had to get fully motion capped, so they not only had to do the voice acting, they also had to act out all of the parts as well. So it was kind of a double whammy in that regard. And I believe, from what they said, they had to use 70 different motion sensor dots on the face, which took roughly 45 minutes to an hour to put all of them on at the start of it. And they had to go through like dressing and makeup and meet there for like 7 in the morning. But usually by the end of the movie, they managed to get the time down to roughly 20 minutes by the end of it. And they had these like transparent face masks that they put on that had little holes in that they'd poke markers in on the face to make sure that they could get the dots on the right spot. And they had to like glue everyone's hair down and stuff to make sure that it didn't get in the way. So by the end of each setting, they actually had people to wash every actor's hair, and apparently that was a really nice way to end off the day. And according to John Heder, he'd constantly find little bits of glue and stuff stuck in his hair afterwards. But out of everything, he also seemed to be the least enthused about everything going on with it. Maybe thought it was a little too childlike and stuff for him, but he didn't seem terribly excited about everything going on. But while they were filming, the director, he was on set all the way throughout everything and helped coach the kids through how he wanted specific things done, doing facial animations and facial expressions and whatnot, which was pretty cool. Steve Buscemi, of course, also on the movie, mentioned that he had a really hard time doing it since everyone was wearing the exact same clothes and there were no real props or sets. The props and sets that they had were all like steel wireframe stuff, because they had to have all the motion cap cameras be able to see through all of the backgrounds and everything like that and see all the dots at any given time. So they had props that looked exactly like the wireframe of what they were looking for. So the couch was there, but it was all wireframed and whatnot. And the super soakers were all wireframed as well. But they also put in weight on all the stuff to make it actually feel like you're holding something to the actors. And they put movable weights inside of the super soakers specifically, so that they actually felt like they had water in them and they'd move around when you'd lift them up and down, which is actually super neat. Because I actually would have expected them to just have a regular, just super light prop and they'd just have to kind of act like it was heavy. But they seem to put a lot of work into making everything seem pretty like lifelike. And it seemed like a lot of people had issues with acting since there were no sets or anything, and it was just like sort of a warehouse setup, which makes a lot of sense because you're not given a whole lot to work with in that way. And if everyone's outfit is the same and everyone looks kind of weird, then you probably feel also pretty weird about things too. For the beginning of every single shot, they had to do a T-pose, which you probably, if you know some stuff about games, you've probably seen that all the time. but before they did the take for every single shot, they had to have everyone T-posing. And then after every single shot was done, they had to also do a T-pose. And this was a way so that they could line all of the body parts and limbs and whatnot all together and make sure they're on the same plane so they're not disjointed, which is actually really cool. I never knew that that was particularly a reason why they do it. I don't know if that's the way it works in games, but as far as movies go, that was something I learned. But one of the difficult things that they had to do was using those exaggerated proportions that they did. They had to account for that when it came to getting to the actual working on the animation part, because certain things would either like clip through other things or not touch other things if they made things smaller or bigger. So they had to do a lot of work to make sure everything actually worked out properly, and I think they had to adjust some of the props and stuff for that. And within the warehouse type room, they used 200 different motion capture cameras all throughout, and they all like would identify each and all the dots that they had on the body and the face and stuff. And specifically, there was a lot more dots on the face so that they could actually see the facial recognition and animations a lot better. So once they had like all the like basic facial and body animation stuff done, they were able to put a rough skeleton inside so they could understand how things were connected, and they sent that off to a different department. I think it was called the integration, and that's where they added on like over like wireframe. They actually added like the body parts and stuff like that, made it a little bit less bare bones. And after all that stuff was added, people were able to add camera angles. So they had these entire scenes filmed like as full-on sets, and then they had specific camera angles that they could move things around. And a really neat thing I learned was they basically did film all this like by hand. So the way they set up the cameras through the animation software is you actually are like holding pretty much a real camera, and you're going through all the motions of moving it around and stuff. So they did follow actual like real life cinematography based things to get their shots the way they were. I didn't really expect that to be the way, because I thought maybe you have the camera set up in a specific way and then you can just animate it to be at a specific camera angle so you don't have to show everything at once. But everything was already rendered. And using the cameras that way, they could pick up any specific lens that they wanted to, and it also gives it a lot more of an organic feel, having it all be pretty handheld. So how they moved on to the sound effects, they actually got a house almost pretty much identical to DJ's house in the movies that they bought. They completely mic'd up the whole house and then rented out like a demolition crew and tore down the entire house, doing it in a similar fashion to that in the movie, using an excavator to get into the roof and pull that down, like attacking the walls and dropping stuff. So they could use all those sound effects in the movie to make it sound exactly as if they were tearing down the house. And I think that's genius. It's expensive compared to other ways they could probably do it, but I mean, if you want to go as real as possible, then that's actually excellent. And with a lot of the noises that they had from like the house and stuff, they brought all the sound equipment up into a like empty barn and played it really, really loud through there so that they could get a lot of creaking noises and whatnot. And then eventually, near the end of development, when all of the house scenes were animated, they got Kathleen Turner to actually do the voiceovers then. She did them pretty much on the spot as she was watching the movie. And they then interlaced her voice with the house sound effects. So that's why it also sounds a little bit more realistic and lifelike compared to just house noises. And that's actually the end of the behind the scenes stuff. I'm like, okay, I have a little bit more for that. And no, that's all they covered for the movie behind the scenes. And it looks like I'm still doing pretty decent on time. So good. It didn't take up the entire thing. I potentially could have gone a little bit more thorough in that section, and maybe I'll come back to that a bit later and if I find some more information, and then I can go back to it and see how much has changed from what the movie was like. A big thing that I did notice is it looked like the kids were a lot younger than they actually were for when the movie came out. So it seems like the movie was filmed maybe in 2002 or 2003 and then released in 2006. Because by the time the movie was premiering and they were doing interviews and stuff for it, they all seemed a good couple years older and like actually in their teenish years. And Mitchell Musso actually looked like he did in Hannah Montana. But I couldn't see anything specifically on when they started development on it. But I might be able to find that later too. So going into the interviews, everyone seemed to... There's really not actually a whole lot of points on this. This was a really, really, really rough interview that went for like 3 minutes and was heavily, heavily edited and cutted. And the person that interviewed the kids did a really, really bad job at it. It was still an interview nonetheless, and it's content I want to cover. But wow, it's rough. So everyone agreed that Jenny looked the most like her character, like in comparison to real life, like the least exaggerated. And they went over a couple of their favorite quotes. Spencer Locke, who played Jenny, said hers was, "Are you guys mentally challenged? Because if you are, I'm certified to teach you baseball." And Sam Lerner, who voiced Chowder, said his favorite, not only line in the movie, but favorite part in the movie was when he was like pretty much running halfway down the street and saying, "See ya, DJ." And his reason for that is because he noticed that a lot of people never really realized that Chowder had nothing, didn't want to do anything with the babysitter. So he constantly was like trying to get away from her as much as he could. So when he had to like come into contact with her, he was just running away, which is actually a pretty funny moment to think about. And you wouldn't really think of it for being anyone's favorite part, but hey, it counts for something. And they also talked about like haunted houses and if people still believe that haunted houses were a thing. And Spencer Locke mentioned that the house actually looked like it had a bit of a human face, and that was creepy. And then that was the end of the interview. So really there was like not a whole lot of anything with that. So moving on to the premiere of the movie. And also the interview was the one done by Hollywood.com. I don't know if they're still kicking. They might be. And then also the premiere was covered by Hollywood.com as well. And it was also done by the same person that did the interview. So my hopes were not particularly high. And this was also only like 3 minutes long. So during the premiere of the movie, she went around asking people what some of their fears were and just did some introductory stuff for a couple of the actors. She talked to Nick Cannon, asked his fears, and he mentioned that he was scared of losing his teeth, which is certainly something, and that he liked taking girls to scary movies. And it also seemed like a bunch of the actors like to take girls to scary movies, which is pretty reasonable, but interesting that that'd be something he brought up. Gil Keenan mentioned that his biggest inspiration for the movie was actually from an apartment that was 2 floors below him, and it had someone named Old Man Ben who terrorized him and a couple other people. So it's not all just totally made up. Maybe the haunted part, but I like to imagine that maybe it was a haunted apartment, and then we'd get like a sequel to this movie. Mitchell Musso is scared of sharks, or was, and Ned from Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide showed up to the premiere and did a little bit of a discussion. Now, they labeled his friend as the guy that played Cookie from Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide, and I'm not sure if that's just because he's black, but it wasn't the right guy. It was actually Christopher Massey that was there with Ned, and Christopher Massey was in Zoe 101, who is also Kyle Massey's brother, who is Corey from Corey in the House and That's So Raven. But they labeled him as the wrong dude, which is awful, but also kind of a little bit funny. But like, I don't know how you can mess it up that bad. And Sam Lerner said he was scared of failure and death, and that was the end of the premiere. And that is pretty much all of the... Wow, I actually powered through this like crazy fast. But that was all the information that I got down this time, and I covered all the extra stuff that I didn't have written down, but wanted to like add in as I talked. Huh. This is like the most formal episode that I've had out of anything. But I mean, I guess that's a good enough time then I need to finish this discussion here. And they do Gil does consider it to be a monster movie. So, not that anyone was saying that it wasn't, but it's classified. So, I guess this has been Zane here with day 11, I think. I'm a bit over a third of the way there at this point. It's wild to think about. I felt like I was losing steam on day 5, but here I am. But anyways, yeah, this has been Zane. I hope you're having a wonderful night, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Bye.